It took Marcus Williams 12 years to earn his position as head of airport security. It took two overzealous guards 12 minutes to forget who signs their paychecks. It took 12 seconds for Marcus to show them his badge. And it took 12 hours for the entire incident to reshape how that airport treats every passenger who walks through their doors. Marcus Williams had built his career over 12 years, rising from TSA screener to regional security director for the Southeast. At 34, he oversaw security operations at 12 major airports, including Jacksonville International, where his journey began. Marcus understood what it felt like to be watched, questioned, and assumed guilty until proven innocent. That understanding drove him to implement training programs focused on unconscious bias and create a culture where security meant protection for all passengers, not intimidation based on appearance. Despite his efforts, Marcus knew real change happens slowly, one interaction at a time. That's why he made it a practice to travel through his airports unannounced, dressed like an ordinary passenger, observing how his security teams performed when they thought no one was watching. On this particular Tuesday morning, Marcus was conducting one of those unannounced assessments at Jacksonville International Airport. He'd deliberately chosen casual clothes, dark jeans, a simple black t-shirt, white sneakers, and a backpack that looked like it had seen better days. No expensive watch, no designer anything, no obvious signs of authority or wealth. Just a young black man trying to catch a flight, exactly like thousands of other passengers who moved through the airport every day. Marcus had arrived at the airport at 6:30 a.m. for a 9:15 flight to Atlanta, giving himself plenty of time to observe morning operations. He'd watched the TSA checkpoint, noted the efficiency of the screening process, observed the interactions between security personnel and passengers. So far, everything looked good. His team was professional, courteous, and efficient. But Marcus knew that the real test came not during routine operations, but during the moments when security personnel had to make judgment calls about suspicious behavior, potential threats, or passengers who didn't fit their unconscious expectations of what a typical traveler should look like. After clearing security, Marcus had found a seat near Gate 15, pulled out a book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and settled in to wait for his flight while continuing to observe airport operations. He chose this particular book deliberately. He wanted to see how people reacted to a young black man reading about racial justice in a public space. For 45 minutes, Marcus sat quietly, occasionally checking his phone, taking notes in a small notebook, and observing the flow of passengers and security personnel through the terminal. He noticed the routine patrols, the way guards interacted with different types of passengers, the subtle differences in how they approached elderly white travelers versus young black men. At 7:45 a.m., Marcus noticed two airport security guards approaching his seating area. Officer Jake Patterson, a 26-year-old who'd been with airport security for 18 months, and Officer Chris Rodriguez, 29 years old with 3 years of experience. Marcus recognized both of them from staff meetings, though they'd never worked directly under his supervision. Marcus watched as officers Jake Patterson and Chris Rodriguez scanned the seating area, making quick judgments. He knew they were about to approach him. Officer Patterson nudged his partner and nodded in Marcus's direction. "That guy's been sitting there for almost an hour," he said quietly. "Keep checking his phone, writing in a notebook, reading some book about race stuff. Doesn't have any obvious luggage except that beat-up backpack." Officer Rodriguez glanced over at Marcus. "He cleared security, right? I mean, he's passed the checkpoint." "Yeah, but you know how it is. Could be casing the terminal. Could be planning something. Black guy, traveling alone, acting secretive. Fits the profile." Marcus kept his expression neutral, but internally he was taking notes. This was exactly the kind of thinking he'd been working to change through training and policy updates. The assumption that a black man reading and taking notes was somehow more suspicious than anyone else doing the same things. The casual use of racial profiling disguised as security protocol. Officer Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. "I don't know, man. He's just sitting there, reading. Lots of people take notes when they travel." "Look, I'm not being racist," Patterson said. his voice carrying the defensive tone of someone who was about to do exactly what he claimed he wasn't doing. "I'm being thorough. Guy's been here an hour. Keeps checking his phone, writing stuff down. That's suspicious behavior regardless of what color he is." But Marcus could see in Patterson's body language, in the way his eyes lingered on the book title, in the assumptions he was making, that race was absolutely a factor in this decision. A middle-aged white businessman doing the exact same things wouldn't have attracted the same level of scrutiny. Marcus had a choice to make. He could identify himself immediately, use his authority to shut down this interaction before it started, or he could let it play out, document exactly how his security team treated a passenger they perceived as suspicious, and use this as a teaching moment for the entire department. He chose to let it play out. Officer Patterson approached. "Excuse me, sir. Airport security. Can I see some identification?" Marcus looked up calmly. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Just routine screening." "You've been here for an extended period. Can I see your boarding pass and ID?" Marcus knew this wasn't routine, but handed over his documents. Patterson examined them carefully. "Marcus Williams," Patterson read aloud, "flying to Atlanta this morning. What's the purpose of your trip, Mr. Williams?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Business meeting," he said. He didn't elaborate, partly because it was true. He had a meeting with regional security directors in Atlanta, and partly because he wanted to see how far this interaction would go. Officer Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "Jake, maybe we should." Patterson held up a hand to silence his partner. "What kind of business, Mr. Williams? And what were you writing in that notebook?" This was crossing the line from security screening into harassment, and Marcus knew it. Passengers weren't required to explain their travel purposes or personal note-taking to airport security without probable cause. But he wanted to document exactly how this played out. "Personal notes," Marcus said, closing the notebook. "Nothing that concerns airport security." Patterson's expression hardened. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up and come with us for additional screening." "On what grounds?" Marcus asked, his voice remaining calm but carrying the authority of someone who knew exactly what legal and procedural boundaries were being crossed. "Suspicious behavior, sir. You've been in this area for an extended period, taking notes, checking your phone frequently. We need to verify that you don't pose a security threat." Marcus could see other passengers starting to stare. Some looked concerned, others looked uncomfortable. A few were taking out their phones to record. This was exactly the kind of incident that could go viral, exactly the kind of public relations nightmare that airports worked hard to avoid. But more than that, this was exactly the kind of discriminatory treatment that Marcus had spent 12 years working to eliminate from airport security operations. Officer Rodriguez tried one more time to de-escalate. "Jake, his ID checks out. He has a valid boarding pass. Maybe we should just—" "Chris, I'm handling this," Patterson snapped. Then turning back to Marcus. "Sir, are you going to cooperate with security screening, or do we need to call additional personnel?" Marcus Williams had reached his limit. But Marcus Williams had forgotten something important about authority. Sometimes it's most powerful when people don't see it coming. Marcus stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. He was tall, 6 feet 2 inches, and his military bearing was unmistakable even in casual clothes. Other passengers in the gate area had stopped what they were doing to watch this confrontation unfold. "Officer Patterson," Marcus said, his voice carrying a tone of authority that made both guards pause. "Before you call additional personnel, I think there's something you should see." Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out a badge. Not just any badge, but the gold shield that identified him as Regional Security Director for the Transportation Security Administration, Southeast Division. Officer Patterson's face went white. "Oh shit," Officer Rodriguez whispered, taking a step back. Marcus held the badge where both officers could see it clearly, then looked around at the passengers who were watching this interaction. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. These officers were doing what they believed was their job, and I want to thank them for their vigilance. However, I also want to address what just happened here." Marcus's voice carried across the gate area, and more passengers gathered to listen. He spoke with the authority of someone used to addressing large groups, someone comfortable with command. My name is Marcus Williams, and I'm the Regional Security Director for TSA Southeast Division. What you just witnessed was an example of racial profiling disguised as security protocol. I was approached, questioned, and asked to submit to additional screening, not because of any genuine security concern, but because I'm a young black man who was reading a book and taking notes in an airport. Officer Patterson tried to interrupt. Sir, I wasn't. Race had nothing to do with. Marcus held up his hand. Officer Patterson, I want you to think very carefully about your next words, because everything you say from this moment forward will be included in my report to TSA headquarters, to airport administration, and to the media outlets that are likely to pick up this story. The gate area had gone completely silent. Passengers were recording with their phones, several were live streaming to social media, and Marcus could see airport supervisors hurrying toward the scene. Officer Rodriguez, Marcus continued, I noticed that you tried to de-escalate this situation several times. That shows good judgment and professionalism. However, you also allowed your partner to continue harassing a passenger without probable cause, which shows that our training on intervention and accountability needs improvement. Rodriguez nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. Marcus turned his attention back to Officer Patterson, who was now visibly sweating. Officer Patterson, in your 18 months with airport security, have you ever randomly approached a middle-aged white businessman reading the Wall Street Journal and taking notes, demanding to see his identification and questioning his travel purposes? Patterson opened his mouth, then closed it without speaking. Have you ever approached an elderly white woman reading a romance novel and writing in a diary assuming she might be casing the terminal for suspicious purposes? Again, Patterson had no answer. The reason you can't answer those questions, Marcus continued, is because you would never consider those behaviors suspicious when performed by passengers who look like what you expect travelers to look like. But when those exact same behaviors are exhibited by a young black man reading a book about racial justice, suddenly they become grounds for harassment. Here's where this story takes a turn that Officer Patterson never could have anticipated. Marcus could have ended the confrontation there. He could have used his authority to discipline both officers, filed his report, and moved on to his flight. But Marcus Williams had spent 12 years learning that real change doesn't happen through punishment alone. It happens through education, accountability, and systematic reform. Officer Patterson, Officer Rodriguez, Marcus said, I want both of you to remain here while I make some phone calls. We're going to use this incident as a learning opportunity for the entire airport security team. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his deputy director. Sarah, it's Marcus. I need you to get to Jacksonville International immediately. We've got a situation that needs immediate attention. No, not a security threat. A training failure. I'll explain when you get here. Next, he called the airport's general manager. Then he called the regional TSA administrator. Finally, he called the director of the airport's diversity and inclusion program. Within 30 minutes, Marcus had assembled what amounted to an impromptu leadership meeting in the gate area, with dozens of passengers serving as witnesses to what was about to become a case study in accountability and reform. Airport General Manager Patricia Coleman arrived first, looking both concerned and confused about why the regional security director was conducting what appeared to be a public tribunal in her terminal. Marcus, what's going on here? Patricia, what's going on here is that 2 of our security officers just demonstrated exactly why our passenger complaint numbers have been trending upward, and why we keep getting reports of discriminatory treatment from travelers of color. Marcus gestured to the crowd of passengers who were still watching and recording. These witnesses just watched Officer Patterson racially profile me, demand additional screening without cause, and threatened to call backup when I asked for justification. They also watched Officer Rodriguez fail to intervene when his partner's behavior clearly violated our policies on passenger treatment and non-discriminatory screening. TSA Regional Administrator James Morrison arrived next, having driven straight from his office in Tampa when he received Marcus's call. Morrison was a career federal employee who'd worked his way up through the ranks over 20 years, and he understood immediately that this incident had the potential to become a major public relations disaster for the agency. "Marcus, give me the situation report." Marcus provided a concise, professional summary of what had occurred, including his own role as an undercover observer and the specific policy violations he'd witnessed. As he spoke, Morrison's expression grew increasingly grim. "Officer Patterson," Morrison said, turning to the younger guard, "is Mr. Williams's account accurate?" Patterson looked like he wanted to disappear. "Sir, I was just trying to— I thought he looked suspicious." "And Officer Patterson, that's not what I asked. Is Miss Williams's account of what happened here accurate? Did you approach him without probable cause? Did you demand identification and question his travel purposes? Did you threaten additional screening based solely on your perception of suspicious behavior?" Patterson's shoulders sagged. "Yes." Morrison nodded grimly. "Officer Rodriguez, did you witness this interaction? Did you attempt to intervene when you saw policy violations occurring?" Rodriguez looked at his feet. "I tried to suggest we should leave him alone, sir, but I didn't push him. I should have been more assertive about stopping what was clearly inappropriate behavior." By now, Sarah Chen, Marcus's deputy director, had arrived along with Dr. Michelle Thompson, the airport's diversity and inclusion director. The gate area had become an impromptu classroom, with aviation security leadership conducting a public accountability session that was being broadcast live on multiple social media platforms. Marcus looked around at the assembled group, his superiors, his subordinates, airport management, and dozens of passengers who were getting an unprecedented look at how incidents of discrimination are addressed in real time. "Here's what we're going to do," Marcus said, speaking to the group, but clearly intending his words for the much larger audience that would see this on social media. "We're going to use this incident to implement immediate reforms to our security protocols and training programs." Marcus turned to address the passengers who were still watching and recording. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed something that happens far too often in airports across the country. Passengers of color are disproportionately selected for additional screening, questioned about their travel purposes, and treated as potential threats simply because of their appearance." A middle-aged white woman in the crowd raised her hand. "I've been traveling through this airport for 20 years, and I've never been stopped and questioned like that. What you experienced was clearly different from how other passengers are treated." An elderly black man nodded in agreement. "Son, I've seen this same thing happen to me and my grandchildren. The fact that you had the authority to address it on the spot gives me hope that things might actually change." Marcus smiled. "Sir, that's exactly why this incident is going to result in systematic changes rather than just individual discipline. We're going to make sure that every security officer in this airport understands that professional, non-discriminatory treatment isn't just a policy requirement, it's a civil rights obligation." Regional Administrator Morrison stepped forward. "Officer Patterson, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Officer Rodriguez, you'll be assigned to additional training on intervention protocols and bystander accountability. And I want both of you to understand that this incident will be used as a training case study for security personnel throughout the region." Dr. Thompson, the diversity director, addressed the crowd. "This airport is committed to ensuring that every passenger, regardless of race, religion, nationality, or appearance, receives equal treatment and equal respect. What happened here today was unacceptable, and we're grateful to Mr. Williams for turning this incident into an opportunity for improvement." Marcus looked at his watch. His flight to Atlanta was boarding in 20 minutes. But this impromptu accountability session had accomplished more for airport security reform than months of policy memos and training sessions. "Officer Patterson," Marcus said, "I want you to understand something. This suspension isn't punishment for punishment's sake. It's an opportunity for you to reflect on your unconscious biases and learn how to be a better security officer. When you return to work, you'll go through comprehensive retraining on non-discriminatory screening, cultural competency, and professional passenger interaction." Patterson nodded, looking genuinely chastened. "Yes, sir. And Mr. Williams, I'm sorry, you're right about everything you said. I would never have treated a white passenger the way I treated you. Officer Patterson, the fact that you can acknowledge that is the first step toward becoming the kind of security professional we need you to be." Marcus turned, To Officer Rodriguez. Officer Rodriguez, your instincts were right when you tried to de-escalate. But in the future, I need you to be more assertive when you see discrimination happening. Bystander intervention is part of your job responsibility. Understood, sir. It won't happen again. But here's where this story becomes about more than just one incident. As Marcus finally headed toward his gate to catch his flight, he realized that this 12-minute confrontation was going to have implications far beyond Jacksonville International Airport. The video footage from passenger phones was already spreading on social media. News outlets were picking up the story, and other airports were reaching out to understand how TSA leadership had handled such a public incident of racial profiling. Within 6 hours, airport accountability was trending on Twitter. Videos showed not just the confrontation but the immediate, transparent response from leadership. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a front-page story about TSA. CNN interviewed Marcus about transportation security and civil rights. The New York Times editorial board praised his demonstration of real accountability. But the real changes happened at airports across the Southeast region over the following week. Marcus implemented mandatory perspective training, anonymous reporting systems, and partnerships with civil rights organizations. He required supervisory intervention whenever officers spent excessive time questioning passengers without clear security justification. Officer Patterson completed additional training and returned with improved professionalism. Officer Rodriguez was promoted to training supervisor, specializing in intervention protocol. The Jacksonville incident became a nationwide TSA training case study, demonstrating how leaders can create systematic change rather than just individual punishment. Marcus Williams never planned to become the face of airport security reform. But 12 years of building expertise, 12 minutes of experiencing the system from the other side, and 12 seconds of revealing his authority had combined to create 12 hours that reshaped how thousands of passengers would be treated in airports across the country. 2 years later, passenger complaint data showed a 40% reduction in discrimination reports at airports under Marcus's oversight. Customer satisfaction scores increased across all demographic groups, and exit surveys consistently praised the professionalism and respectful treatment passengers received from security personnel. Marcus kept that beat-up backpack and that copy of the new Jim Crow in his office, reminders that the best way to understand your system is to experience it from the perspective of those who are most vulnerable within it. At the annual TSA conference, Marcus was asked to deliver the keynote address on leadership and accountability. He ended his speech with the lesson he'd learned that day in Jacksonville. True authority isn't about the badge you carry or the title on your business card. It's about using your power to protect people who don't have power, and making sure that everyone who walks through your airport is treated with the dignity they deserve. Sometimes it takes 12 years to earn the authority to change a system. But when you use that authority to experience injustice firsthand and then demand accountability in real time, you can reshape an entire industry in 12 hours. If you believe that leadership means standing up for what's right, even when you're the one being treated wrongly, hit that like button. Type accountability in the comments if you think every person in authority should experience their system from the perspective of those who are most vulnerable. Subscribe to Black Story Life because every person deserves to be treated with dignity, and every leader has the responsibility to make sure that dignity is protected, not just promised.